Joining me is two wonderful reverends, living legend Reverend William Barber, president of Repairers of the Breach and co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, and Reverend Liz Theo Harris from the Cairo Center and also co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign. Reverends, great to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here today.
Yeah, absolutely. So you got a 14-point plan that I want to get to in a minute about Joe Biden and what he can do. And I want to take some time with that because I think it's very important, and so that we figure out how to push him and which direction to push him in. But first, let's talk about that aforementioned dying mule. So Donald Trump still kicking and screaming all the way up to Tuesday, where he's saying he might not leave. He's talking to the generals or threatening to talk to the generals about martial law, etc. Reverend Barber, you wrote an op-ed about the Southern strategy, and I loved it. I've actually written about this already in my book. It hasn't come out yet, but you made a point that not very many people make, which is Donald Trump is not an aberration. He's the natural conclusion of the Southern strategy. So for folks that don't know what the Southern strategy is, can you explain that real quick and how it led to Donald Trump?
Well, to think about the Southern strategy, you have to think about the 1964, 65, 66, 67, 68, when there was a desire, particularly by Southern Democrats, some extremists like Strom Thurmond, to figure out how do we hold on to the South? Because the South had voted for, in some measure, for Lyndon Baines Johnson and John Kennedy, and of course we know what ended up happening because the movement could push them. And so the Southern strategy said, if we can control these 13 Southern states, from Maryland over to Texas, and we can split the country directly, what they call positive polarization, we can use racialized code words to make the Democratic Party be the party of black folk, Republican Party be the party of white people. If we can use the anger that people had over the civil rights movement and turn it into political power, we can control pretty much the presidents in the United States Senate, because if we control those 13 Southern states, we control almost 170 electoral votes before one vote was counted, and something like 31% of the United States House of Representatives, 26 members of the United States Senate, which means they only needed 25 from the other 37 states to control the US Senate, and only 20% of the House votes from the rest of the 37 states. And it worked, I mean, in a large measure. Democrats ran from the South, Republicans ran to the South. Democrats tried to create a blue wall through the Rust Belt. Democrats built up a rear wall in the Southern strategy, and it worked. And what has them scared, I'll close here, is that in 2008, with the election of President Obama, when he won Virginia, North Carolina, and Florida, that scared the bejesus out of him, because it broke those states. And ever since then, there's been an all-out attempt, ever since the Shelby decision in 2013, to engage in racist voter suppression. Because right now, in many of those Southern states, if just something between 2 and 12%, 2 and 19% of poor and low wealth voters were to vote black and white and brown together, they could fundamentally shift who holds the Senate and who holds the presidency.
So Reverend Barber, I remember I had Pat Buchanan on my show on MSNBC about 10 years ago, and I asked him about the Southern strategy because he was part of Nixon's team.
He wrote the memo.
Yeah, and I said, so Pat, you guys went for, basically the racist vote, but now it looks like time's running out. And he said, yeah, we had a good 40-year run. He just said it. And then unfortunately, turns out they had 4 more years in them. And now I think what's driving them to the absolute brink is that they lost Georgia. And so it's one thing to lose Virginia, you still got some sort of prayer that you could hang on. But if you lose Georgia, and Reverend Barber, I remember you talking about North Carolina and Georgia before the election, saying, the same exact thing you just said here. You said before the election right here, right? And it turns out they lost one of them. And that's why he's not leaving. And people need to understand, this is a natural extension. They have this, the conservatives in the South have never wanted democracy. They literally rebelled against America because they didn't want everybody to have freedom. They hated freedom.
They want democracy when it comes to extremist white views, and when it comes to black and brown people, they don't want democracy. But again, I would say that they are afraid, they're scared because they said they lost North Carolina in 2008. They would have lost the Senate race in North Carolina, but the senator that was running, had a infidelity issue that hurt him. They lose Georgia. They may lose 2 Senate seats in Georgia. But the other thing we have thought that they were so close to losing. Mississippi, black man runs and gets almost within 2 percentage points. In South Carolina, the same thing. And what they know is a lot of the reasons those persons didn't win is because still Democrats, the National Democrats didn't really push in Mississippi and in South Carolina. Once people really commit to organizing in those states are not red states, they're unorganized states. And if you really push them on poor and low wealth people, that's gonna cause major transformation. It was Cornell Belcher just wrote a piece looking at the data and said the Southern strategy is over. If in fact organizing and intentional pulling together people happen, Dr. King's dream comes true. He said in 1965, the end of December, the Montgomery March, he said, black and white people coming together have the power to create the beloved community and the political base to do it. Now, if you add Latinos and indigenous people, that's really here right now. It's here. They knew, I'll close here. Pat Buchanan was right. They told Nixon, if we do this, we can control the South for 40 years. The 40th year was in 1968, the 2008, that was the 40th year. They've been given another 10 years because still now Democrats really don't do what they should in the South. But if we build the right movement, we can change the South. And that's really the only way you're gonna ultimately change the country, because you cannot give people 170 electoral vote head start in a race to 270 and then think you're gonna always be successful. You just can't do that anymore.
So that's exactly right. By the way, I started a couple of different groups, but including Rebellion PAC. And Rebellion PAC put money into Mississippi because we thought it actually was winnable. And it turns out we were closer to right. But you need people to join the rebellion, right? And that's exactly what you guys are talking about. So Reverend Theo Harris, that brings us to the Democrats. So today or on Tuesday, Donald Trump comes out and does a press conference and says, I'm gonna veto the COVID relief bill. It shouldn't be $600, it should be $2,000 in direct payments to the average American. Well, he just outflanked the Democrats on populism. Why is this hard for Democrats? I mean, 88% of Americans wanted a $1,200 check, including 83% of Republicans. What is wrong with the Democratic Party that they can't do the simplest thing in the world and say, let's help the average American and let's hold the Republicans accountable?
Well, I mean, what we say in our work, and this seems to be so true, is that Republicans racialize poverty and Democrats run from it, right? Before even this pandemic hit, there were 140 million people, poor white people, poor black people, poor Latino people, that were poor or one emergency, a storm, a fire, a healthcare crisis, a job loss. We have all of those going on right now, away from economic ruin. And yet, the Democrats, the Republicans have not raised these issues in our public discourse. Everywhere that somebody in this past election in 2020 ran on healthcare for all, on Medicare for all, they won. All the places where folks were talking about 15 in a union, that beat. And so the issue is, how do we make sure that the issues that are the real life and death issues of close to half of this population, and this is before this economic recession, this is before 8 months of no stimulus. This is before actually all of this happens, 250,000 people in this country, the richest country in human history, dying every year from poverty and inequality. And so we have yet to see enough leadership, but that is who turned out, and that's what we started to hear in this election, right? Joe Biden, Kamala Harris talked about 15 in a union. They talked about expanding healthcare. They talked about fair taxation. They talked about student debt relief. And where those issues were raised, people turned out in large numbers. We know that poor and low income people voted at a way higher margin than even years ago. 55% of poor and low income people voted for the Biden-Harris ticket. 6 million more than had voted, 40% more than had voted in the 2016 election. And so what we do know is that when Democrats, when politicians, when folks raise these issues that are the issues that are of concern to people, especially poor and low income people, that folks turn out. And so our campaign is about shifting this narrative, getting this nation to pay attention to these real issues, these interlocking injustices of racism and poverty, ecological devastation, and this war economy where we spend 53 cents of every discretionary dollar on war. And that doesn't go to our veterans, that doesn't go to our service people, that goes to contractors mainly, and very little on healthcare and education.
So you're right, except Reverend Theoris, I really wish that Biden and Kamala Harris had talked way more about $15 minimum wage, because then they might have won Florida. And not that anything would have made a difference. They already got 306 and he still won't leave. But and the Republicans are still pretending he won the election. But in Florida, Biden lost by 3. Minimum wage being increased to $15 won by 22. That's a 25-point difference. If all they had done was talk about $15 minimum wage every time they went to Florida, they would have won Florida. It's a near guarantee. So Reverend Barber, let me go to that. That's in your 14 points. It's point number 3, and it's arguably one of the easiest ones. Democrats claim that they're in favor of it. They passed it in the House already. So now, if the Republicans hold the Senate, are you worried that Biden team is not going to push for it? They're just going to say, well, McConnell's going to block it, so we're just going to drop it. Or do you think they'll push anyway? What would that look like? And then if the Democrats don't pursue it, if the Republicans hold on to the Senate, then what can we do?
Well, let me answer a series of questions, so let me try to answer them in that form. First of all, you're exactly right in terms of Democrats have to learn to run on what they believe and not just offer Republican light. Because if I'm wanting Coca-Cola and you offer me light, I'll take the real thing anytime. So Democrats need to say what they believe, and I agree with you on like 15 in Florida. You can't talk about it a little bit. You got to talk about it. Then you have to talk about what it will do. How many black people will it lift out of poverty? How many white people will it lift out of poverty? How many people in Appalachia will it lift out of poverty if you do this? And that's one of the things we've been pushing the campaign on. Not only say you're for it, but disaggregate the numbers so that people can see themselves in the policy. The second thing is, Democrats have to learn how to, as I could say, hang in there. Now, today, it would be this is the 17th day, I believe, of the anniversary of the Mountain Gomery bus boycott. They would have another 364 days to go. Why am I bringing that up? Because what we've seen happen this week, and this bill that they passed, that really wasn't a bill, it wasn't a Christmas miracle, it was a Christmas mess. What if Democrats have said, we're not moving on the 1,200 at least, we're not moving. They could, and stay there because the Republicans could not do it by themselves. You have one house, but you have to be willing to endure some suffering. And the people who are suffering really didn't want just a little bit. They wanted the real thing. But the problem is sometimes Democrats get so caught up and they compromise before they fight too often. And then they get mad at you if you say that. But the reality is, people need to see a long-term fight, and they need to give the people time to get in the fight. So what do we do in the new year? We're gonna have to make sure whoever gets the Senate, that 15 in the union is not optional, just like free vaccines and just like sick leave and unemployment. But 15 in the union, the people are gonna have to stay engaged. And the Democrats, particularly those in the progressive caucus, are going to have to stay very strong in this. We're gonna have to put a face before America. We can't just back up, and we have to get out of this microwave policy victory stuff. Because none of the things we hold true today, like Social Security, even labor unions, came quick and easy. And I think sometimes what politicians do is they just want something. I hear them talk about I remember when Democrats were bragging about the CARES Act, and we were raising criticism, not saying that it was all bad, but they didn't even want to discuss the parts that were. They didn't even want to discuss the parts beforehand. It was as though, no, you can't, this is the best we can do. Well, when you go into a fight and you're already saying this is the best we can do, and your adversary knows that you're already gonna compromise, then they're not even gonna give you half of what you asked for because they already know you don't have your whole heart in that. We're in the middle of a recession. Many people are in the middle of depression. We have to fight in this new administration, and that's what we intend to do in the Poor People's Campaign. And we said that to the Biden team. We said we want to be allies because we better have you than Trump. We want to be allies because you said some of the right things in the election, but we also reserve the right to be critics because people are dying. And I wish my brother that sometimes on these shows, even with you and others, would say, when they say 300-some thousand people have died, then they say black people are dying at 3 to 7 times higher. Let's go one further. Poor and low wealth people are dying. Whether they're black or white, poor and low wealth people are dying. And we're gonna have to start talking about, you know, that's the one stat they don't keep right now. My daughter's in public health. Do you know they're not keeping a stat based on death and class?
Yeah. So as usual, I want to end every one of your answers with preach it. And so look, the Montgomery bus boycott is a devastating example. So thank you for bringing that up. I had not considered that as a good model to point to, and I will going forward. Because
381 days, man. 381 days they fought. And we can't fight in 2 weeks.
Yeah, if they had said, hey, you know what, we could hold a boycott for just 20 days. Well, then they would have waited 21 days and the boycott would have been over.
Right.
I mean, has a Democrat ever played poker in their lives? If you tell somebody, hey, you know what, if you raise me more than $20, I'm gonna fold, they'll raise you $21. Okay, so you fold.
And there was a compromise offered. In the first couple of weeks in, a group of folk went and compromised. And listen, history tells us Martin King was willing to compromise. And E.D. Nixon and Rosa Parks said, we didn't get out here just to be treated nice on the bus system. We came out here to change it, to tear down Jim Crow. And Democrats and others are gonna have to decide what is it that is not compromisable, because the people will suffer even more if we capitulate and compromise.
Yeah, so I mean, it's Rosa Parks is another great example. You know, sometimes you just need to sit somewhere and go, I'm not moving.
Right.
Until this system changes, I'm not moving. So now, Reverend Theo Harris, I want to go to you because now let's get to the $15 minimum wage should be a layup, but I'd be surprised. Okay, even if they have the Senate, honestly, I bet the conservative Democrats come in there and try to extend how long it's going to be before we get to $15 minimum wage, right? So we'll fight that when we get to it. But now you also have difficult things on this 14 points that you guys are asking the Biden administration to consider. So number 5 is guarantee quality housing for all. So that's a hard one. So Reverend Theo Harris, what do we do with a hard one like that?
Well, I mean, I think it's a hard one in that right now we don't have the political will to end homelessness. But there's actually 5 abandoned houses for every homeless person in this country. So in that way, it's not a hard. And in that way, we have the wherewithal, we have the productivity, we have the capacity to end homelessness tomorrow.
She may have.
Yeah, Reverend Barbara, go ahead, pick it up.
She's coming back. We have the housing stock there. We have people living in the street. We have the necessity to do it. And we're gonna have to push for everything we're saying in the first 50 to 100 days. And some people say, well, that's a lot, but people are going through a lot. Liz, go ahead. She's back.
Yeah, Reverend Theo Harris, you're back. So, yeah, so just finish your thought on how we can do housing, but like Reverend Barbara was saying, yeah, people are saying 50 points a lot, and it's tough to do it in the first 50 to 100 days. So how do you guys put enough pressure on the Biden campaign to actually try for this? I think we might have had Reverend Theo Harris freeze again. So Reverend Barber, if you can step in one more time.
One of the things we're doing is we've decided that not only are we saying these are the things that be done, we're starting Monday up again in January. We said that we were going to put thousands and thousands of people in the street around a mass poor people's assembly tomorrow march on Washington. We didn't do it in 2020 because our medical advisor said not to do it. But we're not just asking them and then going home. We're going to be putting and pushing this and then connecting the issue of homelessness to, for instance, in COVID. If you're not treating the homeless right and making sure they're cared for, you're actually extending the life of COVID. There are these connections that we aren't thinking about. And so what we have to do is, it's a hard thing, but what we need from Democrats, we've seen 4 years of meanness use power. We need to see 4 years of some good folk use power. We cannot continue to have mean folk when they get in, they do whatever I almost said the word, they want to do. And they do it in a hurry, they do it quick, they don't give a hoot about what you think. Well, there's a place that we need a reverse of that. We need a reverse of that for good. And there's some things that Democrats are going to decide, we're just going to do this and then show the public how many people will help and then believe that we can mobilize people. But I can tell you this, people didn't vote for normal. And if they get and they don't see change, we will have something worse than anger. We will have despair and nihilism, and people will be like a raisin in the sun. And you might not ever get them back out to vote if they don't act this time.
One more time, preach it. Look, there's no more room for excuses. So now is the time. We cannot take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. And as Frederick Douglass said, power never concedes without a demand. So it's time for demands. And so one last thing.
Can I say one thing? I know we've got to wrap. This is the thing I want, because it might make your audience cuss, but I won't curse. Billionaires have made $1 trillion since COVID. $1 trillion since COVID. We just passed a bill, Trump is saying less than what billionaires have made during COVID. We don't need to hear any more excuses about what we don't have and what we can't do. What we have to talk about what we must do if this country is going to be America. That's the question before us. Not can we do it, but can America even be?
100%. Reverend Theo Harris, just last quick thing. Where can people find out how to participate?
So you can go to poorpeoplescampaign.org, sign up. There's coordinating committees in 45 states across the country. You can sign up for our email, and you can also check out both Repairs of the Breach and the Cairo Center, because there's ways to get involved in a movement of all kinds of people who are saying, no to poverty, no to war, no to racism, and yes to life. So please get involved.
Yeah, and for all of you out there watching, okay, as Reverend Barber said, it ain't the black people's movement, okay, or black and brown people's movement. It's a poor people's movement, okay, and it's Tucker Carlson and the right wing. They're lying to you. We're not going to make you drink Starbucks coffee. We're not going to do it just for our own ethnicities, okay? We're going to actually raise wages for everyone, Yeah. So come and help us. And so Poor People's Campaign is just an absolutely critical part of it. And you don't have to be poor to participate in the Poor People's Campaign. You can actually care about your fellow human beings. And that's exactly what reverends are supposed to do. So Reverend Barber and Reverend Theo Harris, thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you. Remember Oak Flats. Remember Oak Flats. Right. Take care.
You too.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.